speed to 55 to 65 on 285 and also on 75.
Hello everyone, this is the fifth
It doesn't matter.
and today we're going to study paper 143, going through Samaria. And that starts on page 1607.1. 1607.1. Let's say a little prayer and we'll get started. Father, thank you for bringing us safely here, and thank you for allowing us to get together and study this wonderful revelation. Richard, be with us and open our hearts and minds this morning that we might remember some of this and share it with others. We thank you and we give you the praise in your Son, Jesus' name. All right. Sweetie, you want to start out tonight?
Yes. Paper 143, Going Through Samaria. At the end of June AD 27, because of the increasing opposition of the Jewish religious rulers, Jesus and the 12 departed from Jerusalem after sending their tents and native personal effects to be stored at the home of Lazarus at Bethany. Going north into Samaria, they tarried over the Sabbath at Bethel. Here they preached for several days to the people who came from Gophna and Ephraim. A group of citizens from Arimathea and Thema came over to invite Jesus to visit their villages. The Master and his apostles spent more than 2 weeks teaching the Jews and Samaritans of this region, many of whom came from as far as Antiochus to hear the good news of the kingdom.
Notice here that some of these villages actually sent representation to Jesus to ask him to come. Isn't that interesting? And this is a picture of the area they traveled during this week. And there's another. Nathan, could you take the next one?
The people of southern Samaria heard Jesus gladly, and the apostles, with the exception of Judas Iscariot, succeeded in overcoming much of their prejudice against the Samaritans. It was very difficult for Judas to love these Samaritans. The last week of July, Jesus and his associates made ready to depart for the new Greek cities of Thessalius and Achaeus, near the Jordan.
Sorry, I got a thread on my computer here. Alright. Preaching Archelaus.
The first half of the month of August, the apostolic party made its headquarters at the Greek cities of Archelaus and Thessalius, where they had their first experience preaching to well-nigh exclusive gatherings of Gentiles, Greeks, Romans, and Syrians, for few Jews dwelt in these two Greek towns. In contacting with these Roman citizens, the apostles encountered new difficulties in the proclamation of the message of the coming kingdom, and they met with new objections to the teachings of Jesus. At one of the many evening conferences with the apostles, Jesus listened attentively to these objections to the gospel of the kingdom as the 12 repeated their experiences with the subjects of their personal labors.
A question asked by Philip was typical of their difficulties. Said Philip, "Master, these Greeks and Romans make light of our message, saying that such teachings are fit for only weaklings and slaves. They assert that the religion of the heathen is superior to our teaching because it inspires to the acquirement of a strong, robust, and aggressive character. They affirm that we would convert all men into feeble specimens of passive non-resistors who would soon perish from the face of the earth. They like you, Master, and they freely admit that your teaching is heavenly and ideal, but they will not take us seriously. They assert that your religion is not for the world, that men cannot live as you teach. And now, Master, what shall we say to these Gentiles?" Now keep in mind, this is a good lesson for us today because we have what? All this warring going on constantly, right?
At After Jesus had heard similar objections to the gospel of the kingdom presented by Thomas, Nathanael, Simon, Zelotes, and Matthew, he said to the 12,
Go ahead.
I have come into this world to do the will of my Father, and to reveal his loving character to all mankind. That my brethren is my mission, and this one thing I will do, regardless of the misunderstanding of my teachings by Jews and Gentiles of this day, or of another generation. But you should not overlook the fact that even divine love has its severe disciplines. A father's love for his son oftentimes compels the father to restrain the unwise acts of his thoughtless offspring. The child does not always comprehend the wise and loving motives of the father's restraining discipline. But I declare to you that my Father in paradise does rule a universe of universes by the compelling power of his love. Love is the greatest of all spirit realities. Truth is a liberating revelation, but love is a supreme relationship. And no matter what blunders your fellow men make in their world management of today, in an age to come the gospel which I declare to you will rule this very world. The ultimate goal of human progress is the reverent recognition of the fatherhood of God and the loving materialization of the brotherhood of man.
So what's Jesus' response? That love overcomes all.
Yes.
Not power, not anything else. Not might, not strength, not anything. It's the love that controls. And he does say right here, this should be one of our most favorite paragraphs, is in the fact that he says that love will eventually manage this world that we live in, just like it does other worlds.
I think it's interesting that the Greeks and the Romans really emphasize the robustness of their character and their personality, but that's a very masculine quality.
Yeah.
Women do not have that, and so Jesus' words are very blended with the male and female energy.
Yeah, it is. And it always comes back to the fatherhood of God and the brotherhood of man.
Yeah, and sisterhood.
Yeah.
And he says the ultimate goal is recognition of the fatherhood of God.
That's right. That is the goal. Right. Okay. Lily, would you take the next one?
But who told you that my gospel was intended only for slaves and weaklings? Do you, my chosen apostles, resemble weaklings? Did John look like a weakling? Do you observe that I am enslaved by fear? True, the poor and oppressed of this generation have the gospel preached to them. This religion of this world,
The religions.
the religions of this world have neglected the poor, but my Father is no respecter of persons. Besides, the poor of this day are the first to heed the call to repentance and acceptance of sonship. The gospel of the kingdom is to be preached to all men, Jew and Gentile, Greek and Roman, rich and poor, free and bond, and equally to young and old, male and female.
So it included everybody.
Because my Father is a God of love and delights in the practice of mercy, do not imbibe the idea that the service of the kingdom is to be one of monotonous ease. The paradise ascent is the supreme adventure of all time, the rugged achievements of the eternity. The service of the kingdom on earth will call for all the courageous manhood that you and your co-workers can muster. Many of you will be put to death for your loyalty to the gospel of this kingdom. It is easy to die in the line of physical battle when your courage is strengthened by the presence of your fighting comrades. But it requires a higher and more profound form of human courage and devotion, calmly and all alone, to lay down your life for the love of the truth enshrined in your mortal heart.
And most of them all did exactly that too, didn't they? They were put to death for their beliefs. Today the unbelievers may taunt you with preaching the gospel of non-resistance and with living lives of non-violence. But you are the first volunteers of a long line of sincere believers in the gospel of the kingdom, who will astonish all mankind by their heroic devotion to these teachings. No armies of the world have ever displayed more courage and bravery then will be portrayed by you and your loyal successors, who shall go forth to all the world proclaiming the good news, the fatherhood of God and the brotherhood of man. The courage of the flesh is the lowest form of bravery. My bravery is the highest type of human courage, but the highest and supreme is uncompromising loyalty to the enlightened convictions of profound spiritual realities. And such courage constitutes the heroism of the God-knowing man. And you are all God-knowing men. You are the very truth, the personal associates of the Son of Man. This is what we need still today. Right?
This was not all that Jesus said on that occasion, but it is the introduction of his address, and he went on at great length in application and illustration of this pronouncement. This was one of the most impassioned addresses which Jesus ever delivered to the 12. Seldom did the Master speak to his apostles with evident strong feeling, but this was one of those few occasions when he spoke with manifest earnestness, accompanied by marked emotion.
We want to really put it out there. Yeah, make the apostles know he was serious, right?
The results upon the public preaching and personal ministry of the apostles was immediate. From that very day, their message took on a new note of courageous dominance. The 12 continued to acquire the spirit of positive aggression in the new gospel of the kingdom. From this day forward, they did not occupy themselves so much with the preaching of the negative virtues and the passive injunctions of their master's many-sided teachings.
So I gave him unity to go on.
Lesson on self-mastery. The Master was a perfected specimen of human self-control. When he was reviled, he reviled not. When he suffered, he uttered no threats against his tormentors. When he was denounced by his enemies, he simply committed himself to the righteous judgment of the Father in heaven.
At one of the evening conferences, Andrew asked Jesus, Master, are we to practice self-denial, as John taught us, or are we to strive for the self-control of your teaching? Wherein does your teaching differ from that of John? And Jesus answered, John indeed taught you that the way of righteousness is according with the light and laws of his fathers, and that was the religion of self-examination and self-denial. But I come with a new message of self-forgetfulness and self-control. I showed you the way of life as revealed to me by my Father in heaven. Notice he never says anything negative about John. He just puts everybody in the right pathway of what they really should think about it, right? Okay.
Verily, verily, I say to you, he who rules his own self is greater than he who captures the city. Self-mastery is a measure of man's moral nature and the indicator of his spiritual development. In the old order, you fasted and prayed. As a new creature of the rebirth of the Spirit, you are taught to believe and rejoice. In the Father's kingdom, you are to become new creatures. Old things are to pass away. Behold, I show you how all things are to become new. And by your love for one another, you are to convince the world that you have passed from bondage to liberty, from death into life everlasting.
So this fasting and pray, Jesus can keep praying constantly. Jesus considered bondage, okay, because they didn't have the faith to enjoy the liberties of sonship. Does that make sense?
And isn't that true with the Muslims, that they pray and fast all the time?
All the time, constantly. Yeah. You know, in another place, Jesus says that the time for fasting is over. The time is for rejoicing is here. You know.
By the old way, you seek to suppress, obey, and conform to the rules of living. By the new way, you are first transformed by the Spirit of truth, and thereby strengthened in your inner soul by the constant spiritual renewing of your mind. And so are you endowed with the power of the certain and joyous performance of the gracious, acceptable, and perfect will of God. Forget not, it is your personal faith in the exceedingly great and precious promises of God that ensures your becoming partakers of the divine nature. Thus, by your faith and the Spirit's transformation, you become in reality the temples of God, and His Spirit actually dwells within you. If then the Spirit dwells within you, you are no longer bondslaves of the flesh, but free and liberated sons of the Spirit. The new law of the Spirit endows you with liberty and self-mastery in place of the old law of fear and self-bondage and slavery of self-denial.
So he was serious about setting them free, wasn't he? And what does he set them free from? Setting them free from all these spiritual laws that they had just put on top of more and more and more, 630 laws that the Jews had followed, right? And he basically said, you're free from that. You're sons of God. You move by the Spirit of God now instead of by the fear of the law.
And in truth, that's the only way you can evolve.
Yeah.
You have to have freedom to evolve.
Yeah, you really do.
And the thing is, the way I see it is that spiritual growth is about a dynamic relationship with the Spirit. So it requires will, it requires desire, and a focus on that positive and upper level aspects of our growth in our life, as opposed to the merely concept of obeying rules, whether they are good or bad, or morals even. You know, there's a part in the Urantia Book they say the moral is in a way dead. It's a good thing, but it's being a good moral person is not. It's just a very, very small step towards a true spiritual growth.
Isn't it true too? As we grow spiritually, we really become more and more free. We're a constant evolving being. You know, from this life on to the next life, to the next life after this, in the mansion worlds. So really, as we grow more and more in tune with that thought adjuster, that fragment of God, we become more and more free, don't we? We have less and less to fear. We know we're within the will of God, right? So the fear actually disappears.
Many times when you have done evil, you have thought to charge up your acts to the influence of the evil one, when in reality you have but been led astray by your own natural tendency. Did not the prophet Jeremiah long ago tell you that the human heart is deceitful above all things, and sometimes even desperately wicked? How easy for you to become self-deceived and thereby fall into foolish fears, diverse lusts, enslaving pleasures, malice, envy, and even vengeful hatred.
So the devil made me do it, doesn't cut it, does it? Right. Salvation is by the regeneration of the Spirit and not by the self-righteous deeds of the flesh. You are justified by faith and fellowshipped by grace, not by fear and self-denial of the flesh. Albeit the Father's children who have been born of the Spirit are ever and always masters of the self, and all that pertains to the desires of the flesh. When you know that you are saved by faith, you have real peace with God, and all who follow the way of this heavenly peace are destined to be sanctified by the eternal service of the ever-advancing sons of God. Henceforth, is it not a duty, but rather your exalted privilege to cleanse yourselves from all evils of mind and body, while you seek for perfection in the love of God.
Your sonship is grounded in faith, and you are to remain unmoved by fear. Your joy is born of trust in the divine word, and you shall not therefore be led to doubt the reality of the Father's love and mercy. It is the very goodness of God that leads men into true and genuine repentance. Your secret of the mastery of self is bound up with your faith in the indwelling Spirit, whichever works by love. Even the saving faith you have not of yourself, it also is a gift of God. And if you are the children of this living faith, you are no longer the bondslaves of self, but rather the triumphant masters of yourself, the liberated sons of God.
The liberated sons of God. It says it all right
If then, my children, you are born of the Spirit, you are forever delivered from the self-conscious bondage of a life of self-denial and watch care over the desires of the flesh, and you are translated into the joyous kingdom of the Spirit, whence you spontaneously show forth the fruits of the Spirit in your daily lives. And the fruits of the Spirit are the essence of the highest type of enjoyable and ennobling self-control, even the heights of terrestrial mortal attainment, true self-mastery.
So what Jesus is telling us here is once we're children of God and we really walk in the Spirit, then these things that should tempt us are no longer there, because those things that are evil should never tempt us, right? Or those things which we know is going to injure our fellows or do anything against another human being. So all these sinful things that we were used to doing before, we suddenly realize because of the love aspect of it that we no longer do these things. So, all right. Diversion and relaxation.
Diversion and relaxation. About this time, a state of great nervous and emotional tension developed among the apostles and their immediate disciple associates. They had hardly become accustomed to living and working together. They were experiencing increasing difficulties in maintaining harmonious relations with John's disciples. The contact with the Gentiles and the Samaritans was a great trial to these Jews. And besides all this, the recent utterance of Jesus had augmented their disturbed state of mind. Andrew was almost beside himself. He did not know what next to do, and so he went to the Master with his problems and perplexities. When Jesus had listened to the apostolic chief relate his troubles, he said, "Andrew, you cannot talk men out of their perplexity when they reach such a stage of involvement, and when so many persons with strong feelings are concerned. I cannot do what you ask of me. I will not participate in these personal social difficulties, but I will join you in the enjoyment of a 3-day period of rest and relaxation. Go to your brethren and announce that all of you are to go with me up on Mount Sartaba, where I desire to rest for a day or two."
Okay, so these guys are all trying to bring all this stuff together that Jesus has taught. And then on top of that, they got John's disciples that are still going by the strict law, right? And so they're trying to open them up to this freedom of sonship. So of course it's going to cause, problems between them all. And so Jesus says, well, I'm going to take them all aside and let them relax and have a diversion a little bit, and these immediate problems won't be so important any longer, right? So, all right. Now you should go to each of your 11 brethren and talk with him privately, saying, "The Master desires that we go apart with him for a season to rest and relax. Since we have all recently experienced such vexation of spirit and stress of mind, I suggest that no mention be made of our trials and troubles while on this holiday. Can I depend upon you to cooperate with me in this matter, and in this way privately and personally approach each of your brother?" And Andrew did as the Master had instructed him.
That's interesting. It just seems he actually turned his back on John's disciples.
No, he actually didn't. He included them in everything.
Here he said, go to your 11 brethren.
Yeah, because he wanted to take just the 12 aside, not the rest. Okay, and that's why he did that. And he did it personally on each and every one of them, so they felt like they were doing a personal favor going with the Master and not discussing all these problems for this short period of time. And that way that each one of them could work out these problems in their own mind over a longer period of time and not get such conflict with John's apostles, right? Now John's apostles, almost all of them eventually came around. But it took them longer, and it was harder for them because they were not always in the presence of Jesus like the other 12 were, right? And it's interesting later on in their missions, many times Jesus sent one of the 12 out with one of John's apostles so that they could experience this how to do this properly. So he had to kind of bring them along a little bit differently than the 12. You want to take that?
This was a marvelous occasion in the experience of each of them. They never forgot the day going up the mountain. Throughout the entire trip, hardly a word was said about their troubles. Upon reaching the top of the mountain, Jesus seated them about him while he said, "My brethren, you must all learn the value of rest and the efficacy of relaxation. You must realize that the best method of solving some entangled problems is to forsake them for a time. Then when you go back fresh from your rest or worship, you are able to attack your troubles with a clearer head and steadier hand, not to mention a more resolute heart. Again, many times your problem is found to have shrunk in size and proportions while you have been resting your mind and body."
Amen.
Really?
And this works not only with physical and mental problems, but it works with physical problems. You know, I found working out on this project I've been doing, sometimes I just get so tired I start to make mistakes. And so getting away from it for a while, I can come back to it refreshed. I'm able to finish what I was doing. And I did that with the electrical box out there yesterday. The day before yesterday, I got to the point where I was just so exhausted, I was making mistakes. So I got away from it for the rest of the day and came back the next morning and tackled it again. Got right just fine. So, you know, this works not only with mental problems, but physical problems too.
And also, you know, I got away from you. I went to a workshop yesterday morning because I was so, you know, dealing with so much anxiety and everything about the project in the background. And it was, I couldn't get away from it, so I just, you know, I made a commitment to go someplace else away from us discussing everything, and I came back refreshed. I really did. It was very, I noticed it.
And this is a pain relaxation. Right? Millie.
The next day, Jesus assigned to each of the 12 a topic for discussion. The whole day was devoted to reminiscences and to talking over matters not related to their religious work. They were momentarily shocked when Jesus even neglected to give thanks verbally when he broke bread for their noontide lunch. This was the first time they had ever observed him to neglect such formalities.
Okay, and you remember when we studied before the reversion directors? It's kind of what the reversion directors do too, don't they? They get our minds off of what we're doing so that we can relax a little bit.
Now, this is on the mansion world, or is it as well here?
Yeah, on the mansion world.
Because there is one thing that keeps on puzzling me. We hear about all the angels and different kinds of angels and how they are supposed to help and blah blah blah. Well, where are they? You know, because I have faith that they are there. I'm not questioning. I understand also that part of their work is about the global advancement of society. But frankly, the direct help. I don't know how to get it. Let's put it that way, right?
Well, you know, really in this life, the angels are more there to give us spiritual lessons and put things in front of us to cause difficulties more than they are to help us.
They're doing a really good job.
They help us to grow spiritually, but not physically. This first level, the mind level of the first level, or life as we know it, really is for developing our spiritual mind, and that's it. All the rest of the difficulties is for us to really work out on our own along with our thought adjuster, with God's guidance. But the reversion directors and things like this, they don't think this life is long enough and worth enough to spend a lot of time as celestial beings on us, other than the fact of our survival to the next level. That's the number one lesson we have to learn in this life is survival, right? Having faith in God and our fellow man. That's the lessons we learn on this world. And when people say, well, what's the meaning of life? Really, the meaning of life is experience. Experience God the Father and experience your brothers, men and women, so that you are preparing yourself for the next level, which is your real life. If you think about it.
It is sometimes difficult, though, in dealing with children, you know, to really the guardian angels are supposed to protect us, that, and it does say that in the book,
Yeah.
that they are to protect us. You know, but so many things happen, and it's just.
They're here to spiritually protect us.
Okay.
Yeah,
Right, well,
that's
that
what it is,
right.
yeah.
Yeah, and
They will not keep accidents of time
Yeah.
from happening.
They may though.
Huh?
They may in some instances.
Yeah, they may in very special circumstances, but they don't do that on a normal basis. Even children, they don't keep accidents of time. In other words, if your child climbs up a tree and jumps off, they'll probably go break an arm or leg. You know, they won't keep them from hitting the ground. What they will do is let them learn the lesson of breaking their arm and protect them in that way and keep them on their spiritual pathway. Really, the only thing in this life that's important is your decision to survive. Your decision that you're a son of God and a brother of everyone on this planet. That is the most important decision of your life. Everything else is extra, basically. Okay? That's why they call this is the vestibule to your real life, right? Don't mean you can waste this life, but it does mean that you are responsible to every single decision you make that affects yourself and other people, right?
But there is something we read recently that I think it was Jesus speaking, or I don't remember exactly, but he was saying that we would be well served to cooperate with our angels.
Angels and thought adjuster, right?
Right, but angels, including, and thought adjuster is pretty clear, but angels. And that's the part I am
foggy about.
How do you cooperate with those angels you don't see?
Yeah, and you don't hear them.
And you don't hear, you don't seem to have, I'm sure they do things, but we have no awareness. I have none. So then what?
I think what he's talking about there, Jim, more than anything, is when the angels put difficulties in front of you, you don't get frustrated that your life is so difficult. That's really what he's saying. In other words, when difficulties come in your life, you have to keep going with a healthy attitude, a good attitude, and just keep knocking away at it till you get to the goals of your life, really. And I think that's what he's talking about, cooperating with your angels, because sometimes angels put difficulties in our life for us to learn lessons. And we think that we're the only ones going through these things. You know, how many times have you thought to yourself, why is God doing this to me for this or that or the other? God's not really doing that to you at all. That's part of your living experience, you know. And that's part of the cooperation with angels. But we don't know when they put it in front of us, and we don't know when they don't put it in front of us. And how many things that happens to us in life is because of our own reactions or actions to something before that.
Our core values that we develop through our childhood, basically, that may be inaccurate. So we have to learn. Unlearn. Exactly. Yeah.
We were just talking about this morning, how some children, the children that are fortunate, are those who have parents that start them on the right pathway. But that's not the case in a good many people, you know. I mean, well, look at Jill. You know, Jill's upbringing was different from mine, you know, and my upbringing was different from Diane's and Millie's, you know. So, you know, if you have your parents that are atheists and they don't teach you the ways of God, you have to learn those things from yourself. Or if you're one type of religion over another, if that's very strict and just like he was talking about this morning, if your religion is all about fasting and denial and all these other things, then you have to reteach yourself as you get older and you start to understand these things. Where some children are brought up in proper ways and makes their life much more easier as they get older. It's just the luck of the draw. Really.
Because, you know, and some parents actually provide opportunities for children to make choices. And when you teach your children to make choices when they're young, it helps us as we grow older and become adults to make those choices because we've had a series of experiences, you know, making them. But,
and those who do have the God-loving parents are always better off. But that does not mean that those who do not cannot overcome that in the adult years. Because you make your own decisions, right?
Your own choices.
Now, who was red last?
So, I don't know, really, I don't know. Do you know, Bill?
Millie, why don't you take this?
Did I just read that?
I don't remember.
When they went up the mountain, Andrew's head was full of problems. John was inordinately perplexed in his heart. James was grievously troubled in his soul. Matthew was hard-pressed for the funds, inasmuch as they had been sojourning among the Gentiles. Peter was overwrought and had recently been more temperamental than usual. Judas was suffering from a periodic attack of sensitivity and selfishness. Simon was unusually upset in his efforts to reconcile his patriotism with the love of the brotherhood of man. Philip was more and more nonplussed by the way things were going. Nathanael had been less humorous since they had come in contact with the Gentile populations, and Thomas was in the midst of a severe season of depression. Join the club. Only the twins were normal and unperturbed. They didn't start out normal. Only the twins were normal and unperturbed. All of them were exceedingly perplexed about how to get along peaceably with John's disciples.
Notice each personality has their own problems, right? Jim.
The twins had to have a lovely life.
They did. They were
float along.
didn't have a clue.
Clueless.
Sometimes ignorance is bliss, right?
The third day, when they started down the mountain back to their camp, a great change had come over them. They had made the important discovery that many human perplexities are in reality non-existent, that many pressing troubles are the creations of exaggerated fear and the offspring of augmented apprehension. They had learned that all such perplexities are best handled by being forsaken. By going off, they had left such problem to solve themselves.
How many times do we do the same thing? You know, we think we got this huge problem, and really it's not a problem at all. Their return from this holiday marked the beginning of a period of greatly improved relations with the followers of John. Many of the 12 really gave way to mirth when they noted the change of state of everybody's mind and observed the freedom from nervous irritability which had come to them as a result of the 3 days vacation from the routine duties of life. There is always danger that monotony of human contact will greatly multiply perplexities and magnify difficulties.
Not many of the Gentiles in the 2 Greek cities of Archelaus and Thessalias believed in the gospel, but the 12 apostles gained a valuable experience in this their first extensive work with exclusively Gentile populations. On a Monday morning about the middle of the month, Jesus said to Andrew, "We go into Samaria." And they set out at once for the city of Sychar, near Jacob's well.
You recognize this story right off a minute here.
The Jews and the Samaritans. For more than 600 years, the Jews of Judea, and later on those of Galilee also, had been at enmity with the Samaritans. This ill feeling between the Jews and the Samaritans came about in this way. About 700 years BC, Sargon, king of Assyria, in subduing a revolt in the central Palestine, carried away and into captivity over 25,000 Jews of the northern kingdom of Israel, and installed in their place an almost equal number of the descendants of the Cuthites, the Sepharites, and the Hamathites. Hamathites. Later on, Ashurbanipal sent still other colonies to dwell in Samaria.
Okay, so you understand what happened? They took this large chunk of people and sent it to Samaria, and another large chunk of the Samaritans and sent them to just the opposite. So he mixed them all together, all right? And this was 700 years before this period of time. Okay, so for 700 years, these two groups have been hating each other and fighting with each other. Okay, does that sound like the typical Middle Eastern thing that goes on over there? Okay, And
So they took the Jews from Palestine and put them in Samaria, and then
Samaritans put them in Palestine. Right.
Sounds like something they did after World War II.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
it really does, you know. But the whole point was they were trying to mix them together to stop a huge conflict of the two groups, right? Because if there's less of them, they have less of a tendency to band together and overthrow the other. So it was probably a good idea at the time. Okay. Gene.
The religious enmity between the Jews and the Samaritans dated from the return of the former from the Babylonian captivity, when the Samaritans worked to prevent the rebuilding of Jerusalem. Later, they offended the Jews by extending friendly assistance to the armies of Alexander. In return of their friendship, Alexander gave the Samaritans permission to build a temple on Mount Gerizim, where they worshipped Yahweh and the tribal gods and offered sacrifices much after the order of the temple services at Jerusalem. At least they continued this worship up to the time of the Maccabees, when John Hyrcanus destroyed their temple on Mount Gerizim. The apostle Philip, in his labors for the Samaritans after the death of Jesus, held many meetings on the site of this old Samaritan temple.
Yes, they always go back to this sacrificial thing, right? In this temple. The antagonism between the Jews and the Samaritans were time-honored and historic. Increasingly, since the days of Alexander, they had had no dealings with each other. The 12 apostles were not averse to preaching in the Greek and other Gentile cities of the Decapolis and Syria, but it was a severe test of their loyalty to the Master when he said, "Let us go to Samaria." But in the year and more that they had been with Jesus, they had developed a form of personal loyalty which transcended even their faith in his teachings and their prejudices against the Samaritans. That's why the story of the Good Samaritan is so important. This is a picture of Alexandria during that period of time. All right.
5, the woman of Sychar.
Sychar.
Sychar. When the master and the 12 arrived at Jacob's well, Jesus, being weary from the journey, tarried by the well while Philip took the apostles with him to assist in bringing food and tents from Sychar, for they were disposed to stay in this vicinity for a while. Peter and the Zebedee sons would have remained with Jesus, but he requested that they go with their brethren, saying, "Have no fear for me, these Samaritans will be friendly. Only our brethren the Jews seek to harm us." And it was almost 6 o'clock on this summer's evening when Jesus sat down by the well to await the return of the apostles.
So he's pretty exhausted. He just wants to sit and rest by the well. It's about 6 o'clock in the evening. It's hot. Okay.
The water of Jacob's well was less mineral than that from the wells of Sychar, and was therefore much valued for drinking purposes. Jesus was thirsty, but there was no way of getting water from the well. When therefore a woman of Sychar came up with her water pitcher and prepared to draw from the well, Jesus said to her, "Give me a drink." The woman of Samaria knew Jesus was a Jew by his appearance and dress, and she surmised that he was a Galilean Jew from his accent. Her name was Nalda, and she was a comely creature. She was much surprised to have a Jewish man thus speak to her at the well and ask for water. It was not deemed proper in those days for a self-respecting man to speak to a woman in public, much less for a Jew to converse with a Samaritan. Therefore, Nalda asked Jesus, "How is it that you, being a Jew, ask for a drink of me, a Samaritan woman?" And Jesus answered, "I have indeed asked you for a drink. But if you could only understand, you would ask me for a draught of the living water." Then said Nalda, "But sir, you have nothing to draw with, and the well is deep. Whence then have you this living water? Are you greater than our father Jacob, who gave us this well, and who drank thereof himself and his sons and his cattle also?"
Familiar story, right? This is a picture of Jesus sitting on the side of the well talking to Nalda.
Jesus replied, "Everyone who drinks of this water will thirst again, but whosoever drinks of the water of the living Spirit shall never thirst. And this living water shall become in him a well of refreshment springing up even to eternal life." Nalda then said, "Give me this water that I thirst not, neither come all the way hither to draw. Besides, anything which a Samaritan woman could receive from a commendable Jew would be a pleasure."
That's where the flirt came in, right? So she started flirting with him because he was talking to her. Nalda did not know how to take Jesus' willingness to talk with her. She beheld in the Master's face the countenance of an upright and holy man, but she mistook friendliness for commonplace familiarity, and she misinterpreted his figure of speech as a form of making advances to her. And being a woman of lax morals, she was minded openly to become flirtatious. And when Jesus looked straight into her eyes with a commanding voice, said, "Woman, go get your husband and bring him hither." This command brought Nalda to her senses. She saw that she had misjudged the Master's kindness. She perceived that she had misconstrued his manner of speech. She was frightened. She began to realize that she stood in the presence of an unusual person. And groping about in her mind for a suitable reply, in great confusion she said, "But, sir, I cannot call my husband, for I have no husband." Then said Jesus, "You have spoken truth. For while you may have once had a husband, he with whom you are now living is not your husband. Better would it be for you if you would cease to trifle with my words and seek for the living water which this day I have offered you."
By this time Nalda was sobered, and her better self was awakened. She was not an immoral woman, wholly by choice. She had been ruthlessly and unjustly cast aside by her husband, and in dire straits had consented to live with a certain Greek as his wife, but without marriage. Nalda now felt greatly ashamed that she had so unthinkingly spoken to Jesus, and she most penitently addressed the Master, saying, "My Lord, I repent of my manner of speaking to you, for I perceive that you are a holy man, or maybe a prophet." And she was just about to seek direct and personal help from the Master, when she did what so many have done before and since, dodged the issue of personal salvation by turning to the discussion of theology and philosophy. She quickly turned the conversation from her own needs to a theological controversy. Pointing over to Mount Gerizim, she continued, "Our fathers worshipped on this mountain, and yet you would say that in Jerusalem is the place where men ought to worship. Which then is the right place to worship God?"
Jesus perceived the attempt of the woman's soul to avoid direct and searching contact with its Maker, but he also saw that there was present in her soul a desire to know the better way of life. After all, there was in Nalda's heart a true thirst for the living water. Therefore, he dealt patiently with her, saying, "Woman, let me say to you that the day is soon coming when neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem will you worship the Father, but now you worship that which you know not, a mixture." What did he say? Wait a minute. "Let me say to you that the day is soon coming when neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem will you worship the Father, but now you worship that which you know not, a mixture of the religion of many pagan gods and Gentile philosophies. The Jews at least know whom they worship. They have removed all confusion by concentrating their worship upon one God, Yahweh. But you should believe me when I say that the hour will come soon, even now is, when all sincere worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and in truth, for it is just such worshipers the Father seeks. God is spirit, and they who worship him must worship him in spirit and in truth. Your salvation comes not from knowing how others should worship or where, but by receiving into your own heart this living water which I am offering you even now."
Okay, so instead of worshiping God on mountains, in churches, in synagogues, whatever, and worshiping all these different concepts of God, Jesus is telling her that the day will come when people will worship God as a spirit, in spirit, regardless of where they are, right? And they will worship just one God, which the Jews call Yahweh, or God the Father, right? All right. And that is what he was talking about, this living water. What is this living water? It is the Father inside you, right? The thought adjuster that leads you back to God, right? This is what keeps you from spiritually thirsty. You have this indwelt adjuster constantly feeding you and spiritually guiding you along, right? All right. So it won't matter where it is. The mountain, the philosophy, and all this stuff is irrelevant to believing in God the Father. All right. Gee.
But now that we make one more effort to avoid the discussion of the embarrassing question of her personal life on earth and the states of her soul before God. Once more she resorted to question of general religion, saying, "Yes, I know. So John has preached about the coming of the converter, he who will be called the deliverer, and that when he shall come, he will declare to us all things." And Jesus, interpreting Nelda, said with startling assurance, "I who speak to you am he."
So he's telling Nelda, I am this deliverer that John taught us about, right? This was the first direct and positive and undisguised pronouncement of his divine nature and sonship which Jesus made on earth. And it was made to a woman, a Samaritan woman, and a woman of questionable character in the eyes of men up to this moment, but a woman whom the divine eye had beheld as having been sinned against more than as sinning of her own desire, and is now being a human soul who desired salvation, desired it sincerely and wholeheartedly, and that was enough. So Jesus' first announcement that he was the Son of God, he was the deliverer, was to a woman who was considered questionable character, right? And there he is again, talking to her, proclaiming to her.
As Nelda was about to voice her real and personal longing for better things and a more noble way of living, just as she was ready to speak the real desire of her heart, the 12 apostles returned from Sychar, and coming upon the scene of Jesus talking so intimately with this woman, the Samaritan woman, and alone, they were more than astonished. They quickly deposited their supplies and drew aside, no man daring to reprove him, while Jesus said to Nelda, "Woman, go your way. God has forgiven you. Henceforth you will live a new life. You have received the living water, and a new joy will spring up within your soul, and you shall become a daughter of the Most High." And the woman, perceiving the disapproval of the apostles, left her water pot and fled to the city.
Okay, so she accepted the message that Jesus had to say. She accepted her own salvation. And he says here, you become a daughter of the Most High. Now, this use of the Most High means what? God the Father. Right. Yeah. Not the Most High as we just studied in paper 43. Right? That's a different concept. This is the general use of the Most High, which meant God the Father in that day and time. Okay. Millie.
As she entered the city, she proclaimed to everyone she met, "Go out to Jacob's well and go quickly, for there you will see a man who told me all I ever did. Can this be the converter?" And ere the sun went down, a great crowd had assembled at Jacob's well to hear Jesus. And the Master talked to them more about the water of life, the giving of the indwelling Spirit. Gift of the indwelling Spirit.
What is he talking about? The adjuster. Right? Isn't it interesting, even in the life of Christ, if you understand the previous papers, like the adjuster papers, you understand what he's talking about here. That's why it's important to read the whole book.
Did they have thought adjusters while Jesus was with them?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now, not generally everyone till after Pentecost, right? Remember that? But even before Pentecost, if you ever came to the decision of accepting God in your life, you immediately got an adjuster. Even before Pentecost, right? It was what happened at Pentecost is the Spirit of truth prepared all human mind to receive the adjuster at the same time, right?
So, but before you have the thought adjuster, and at that time there was not the Spirit of truth.
Right.
So what were your spiritual
guiding from?
Yes, what were
the thought adjuster and the guardian angels and things like that.
Thought adjuster was not there. Before you made the decision, right?
Before you make a decision, your thought adjuster was not there. Now keep in mind, Jill, all after the Spirit of truth was poured out on all flesh, normally children at about the age 5.5 all receive their adjusters, right? But as soon as they make the first moral decision. But before then, even into adulthood, until you made a decision to follow God, that you had this thirst for God the Father, you would not receive your adjuster, even though you made that first moral decision. Y'all understand that, right? When you were a child, before the Spirit of truth, as you growing up, you make that first moral decision, you weren't automatically given an adjuster. Adjusters were only assigned to those who made the decision to seek after God.
So, what are the motivation? What guides people at that time? What did guide them to, or encourage them to go in spirit that way, to get to that point?
The the Holy Spirit would, for one.
So the Holy Spirit is what, the seven-minded judgments?
No, it's from the creative mother spirit.
It's from the creative mother spirit. But the seven adjutant mind spirits helps that, Jill, because of the worship and wisdom. The last two, when you get wise and you realize a need for worship, what would happen? You would get an adjuster, right? Because that first thought of, I need God in my life, or worship for something greater than yourself, that would key that the adjuster, it was time for an adjuster, right? Because this being was seeking after something higher than themselves. Does that make sense? Remember, humans up to the time of Christ, even many humans were still pretty barbaric. They were barbarians. Okay? So people didn't readily want to worship God. They didn't worship anything. Right? Many of them. So, but the difference, what made a difference, is the Spirit of truth. Because the Spirit of truth is the divinity and the Spirit of the Son. The Son of God and the Creator Son. Right? So that prepares the human heart for the adjuster as soon as you make that first decision, moral decision. That's what the big change at Pentecost was the opening up of all beings receiving the adjuster. And it's done through the divinity of Christ and the divinity of the Son of God.
And that was the fourth ethical revelation.
Yeah, and that was the fourth ethical revelation. I think you're right, Gio.
The apostles never ceased to be shocked by Jesus' willingness to talk with women of questionable character, even immoral women. It was very difficult for Jesus to teach his apostles that women, even so-called immoral women, have souls which can choose God as their Father, thereby becoming daughters of God and candidates for life everlasting. Even 19 centuries later, many show the same unwillingness to grasp the Master's teachings. Even the Christian religion has been persistently built up around the fact of the death of Christ instead of around the truth of his life. As a matter of fact, someone told me spiritually dead because I didn't believe in the atonement doctrine in the church.
Oh, I can imagine that.
Intelligent person, right? Not an educated, intelligent person. Because I was questioning the atonement doctrine. Says, oh, then in the eyes of God you're already spiritually dead. You are done.
Yeah.
The world should be more concerned with this happy and God-revealing life than with his tragic and sorrowful death.
Okay. So what's this telling us? It's telling us that this whole sacrificial system is wrong, right? You know, the whole idea of sacrificing. All you have to do to receive eternal life is what? Believe in the fatherhood of God. You know, receiving God as your...
They constantly teach that he died to save us.
died for
And
us.
I contradict them and
It's a
say, no,
sacrifice.
he
Yeah.
lived to save you.
He lived to save you. That's
He
right.
didn't die to save you. That was a mistake.
Yeah. Yeah, the whole uniqueness of Christ and his life was a resurrection. If you think, if Christ was not resurrected, then his life, we would think he was just a prophet, right? Just like any other prophet that's come along, right? He's the only being that's ever resurrected himself. And it's the resurrection. It's the life of Christ that saves you, not the death of Christ.
And he proclaimed to be a son of God. No other prophet in his right mind did
That's
that.
right. Would do
Only
that.
you can hear that from time to time from
Yeah.
people out of their mind, but the true prophets, I don't think ever.
Yeah. Either Jesus was who he said he was, or he was insane, right? I happen to believe that he was who he said he was. Nava told this entire story to the Apostle John the next day, but he never revealed it fully to the apostles and did not speak of it in detail to the 12. Let's go back one second here. I think we missed the last sentence on that last one. You didn't read that last sentence.
Yeah, the world should be more concerned with his happy
He
and
did, he
godly
stopped. Yeah, he
Yeah.
commented after
Yeah.
Truth of His Life,
Yeah.
and then he read it.
Go ahead and read it.
The
Oh,
world
did you-
should be more concerned with his happy and God-revealing life than with his tragic and sorrowful death.
You did read it. I stand corrected. All right. Get this one.
Did you read that one?
Yeah, I read that. Okay. You're up there.
Neltha told John that Jesus had told her, "All I ever did." John many times wanted to ask Jesus about this visit with Neltha, but he never did. Jesus told her only one thing about herself, but his look into her eyes and the manner of his dealing with her had so brought all of her checkered life in panoramic review before her mind in a moment of time that she associated all of this self-revelation of her past life with the look and the word of the Master. Jesus never told her she had had five husbands. She had lived with 4 different men since her husband cast her aside, and this, with all her past, came up so vividly in her mind at the moment when she realized Jesus was a man of God, that she subsequently repeated to John that Jesus had really told her about all of herself. Told her all of herself.
This is amazing at this time, from a cultural perspective, how concerned they are about the wife, the marital status and not straying, and how much more liberty there is going on in our era these
Yeah.
days. And
Yeah.
Yeah, many young people never marry. You know, they live as maids for for their entire lifetimes. I know grown adults that are doing that right now that technically never got married. They live with their mate their entire life. So
or worse, they go around and around and around.
a lot of different
Love,
mates.
yeah, so
Yes. Really, could you take the next one?
The Samaritan revival. On the evening that Nalda drew the crowd out from Sychar to see Jesus, the 12 had just returned with food, and they besought Jesus to eat with them instead of talking to the people, for they had been without food all day and were hungry. But Jesus knew that darkness would soon be upon them, so he persisted in his determination to talk to the people before he sent them away. When Andrew sought to persuade him to eat a bite before speaking to the crowd, Jesus said, "I have meat to eat that you do not know about." When the apostles heard this, They said among themselves, "Has any man brought him aught to eat? Can it be that the woman gave him food as well as drink?" When Jesus heard them talking among themselves, before he spoke to the people, he turned aside and said to the 12, "My meat is to do the will of God, the will of him who sent me, and to accomplish his work. You should no longer say, 'It is such and such a time until the harvest.' Behold, these people coming out of Samaritan Sea to hear us. I tell you, the fields are already white with the harvest. He who reaps receives wages and gathers his fruit to eternal life. Consequently, the sowers and the reapers rejoice together. For herein is the saying true: one sows and others and another reaps. I am now sending you to reap that whereon you have not labored. Others have labored, and you are about to enter into their labor." Then he said, in reference to the preaching of John the Baptist.
So what he's saying is this. He's saying that John prepared these people for salvation. So they're reaping the benefits of all the work that John has done. All they have to do is bring these people into salvation. So they are reaping where they have not sown. They have not convinced these people to be saved. John has already prepared and done that. So all they're doing is allowing them to take the next step of believing in the Father, and they come into the kingdom. Right?
It's like when we were at the Spirit Expo or wherever we're in a situation where we talk to people about the Urantia Book.
Yeah.
Some of them come, talk for them for 2 minutes. Okay, I want it right now.
Yeah.
And some others like, So
Yeah.
some are more prepared than others. So those who are more prepared that had in their lives more influences that prepare them. And then we were just on that day, time and day, the last, with respect to getting them the Urantia Book, the last chain, the last part of the process. Right?
Yeah.
And the first of many other processes coming next, right? So one step at a time.
We might even ask you about books later. Books.
I forgot to bring them.
Well, that's fine. I can get them from you later, but that's fine. Okay.
I know I talked to a few people, at the expo last week, were in your presentation, and two in particular, and I talked to them almost the whole time you were gone, to each of them, and they walked away and they didn't buy the book. But I could feel that they were actually accepting the information. They just weren't ready to
It was really fun. It was funny. Last time we had a lot of people run by at the last moment to pick up a book. It was really fun. Strange. You're right.
Jesus and the apostle went into Sychar and preached 2 days before they established their camp on Mount Gerizim. And many of the dwellers in Sychar believed the gospel and made requests for baptism. But the apostles of Jesus did not yet baptize.
They felt like they needed to be baptized as an outward sign because that's what John did, right? The first night of the camp on Mount Gerizim, the apostles expected that Jesus would rebuke them for their attitude toward the woman at Jacob's well, but he made no references to the matter. Instead, he gave them that memorable talk on the realities which are central to the kingdom of God. In any religion, it is very easy to allow values to become disproportionate to permit facts to occupy the place of truth in one's theology. The fact of the cross became the very center of subsequent Christianity, but it is not the central truth of the religion which may be derived from the life and teachings of Jesus. That's what all Christianity did, didn't they? They replaced the concept of the cross with the message of the salvation that is free, right? They substituted the cross and the sacrifice of the cross to the fact that salvation is free. Right?
The theme of Jesus' teaching on Mount Gerizim was that he wanted all men to see God as a father friend, just as he, Jesus, is a brother friend. And again, he impressed upon them that love is the greatest relationship in the world, in the universe. just as truth is the greatest pronouncement of the observation of these divine relationships.
Sorry, catch up here.
Jesus declared himself so fully to the Samaritans because he could safely do so, and because he knew that he would not again visit the heart of Samaria to preach the gospel of the kingdom.
So he knew he would never be back there. Right?
Jesus and the 12 camped on Mount Gerizim until the end of August. They preached the good news of the kingdom, the fatherhood of God, to the Samaritans in the cities by day and spent the nights at the camp. The work which Jesus and the 12 did in these Samaritan cities yielded many souls for the kingdom, and did much to prepare the way for the marvelous work of Philip in these regions after Jesus' death and resurrection, subsequent to the dispersion of the apostle to the ends of the earth by the bitter persecution of believers at Jerusalem.
So the same area Philip came back and preached in. Right? Okay, teaching about prayer and worship. At the evening conferences on Mount Gerizim, Jesus taught many great truths, and in particular he laid emphasis on the following.
True religion is the act of an individual soul in its self-conscious relations with the Creator. Organized religion is man's attempt to socialize the worship of individual religious.
Okay, so true religion is that relationship of one's own soul to God the Father, right? Not the social aspect of going to church. That makes sense?
Worship, contemplation of the spiritual, must alternate with service, contact with material reality. Work should be alternate with play. Religion should be balanced by humor. Profound philosophy should be relieved by rhythmic poetry. The strain of living, the time, tension of personality, should be relaxed by the restfulness of worship. The feelings of insecurity arising from the fear of personality isolation in the universe should be antidoted by the faith contemplation of the Father and by the attempted realization of the Supreme.
So, everything has its complement, right? That's why worship and wisdom go together, right? It's not good enough to just have worship. You have to have the wisdom of material reality too, right? Everything's got its balancing point.
Prayer is designed to make man less thinking, but more realizing. It is not designed to increase knowledge, but rather to expand insight.
That's what the expanding insight is, the realizing part, right? Not to ask for things, right? Worship is intended to anticipate the better life ahead and then to reflect these new spiritual significances back into the life which is now. Prayer is spiritually sustaining, but worship is divinely creative.
Worship is the technique of looking to the one with the inspiration of service to the many. Worship is a yardstick which measures the extent of the soul's detachment from the material universe and its simultaneous and secure attachment to the spiritual realities of all creation.
It's interesting here, he says worship is the technique of looking to the one for the inspiration of the service to the meaning. That's for the fatherhood of God, brotherhood of man, right?
Prayer is self-reminding, sublime thinking. Worship is self-forgetting, super thinking. Worship is effortless attention, true and ideal soul rest, a form of restful spiritual exertion.
Well, Jesus makes it clear what this concept of worship is in this.
Worship is the act of a part, identifying itself with the whole, the finite with the infinite, the Son with the Father, time in the act of striking step with eternity. Worship is the act of the Son's personal communion with the Divine Father, the assumption of refreshing, creative, fraternal, and romantic attitudes by the human soul and spirit.
Though the apostles grasped only a few of his teachings at the camp, other worlds did, and other generations on earth will. It's interesting how they mention how other worlds is watching this too. As it, and now at the end of page 143. Next Sunday meeting, we'll study 144, Gilboa and the Decapolis. Jill, would you like to say a closing prayer for us today?
Dear Universal Father, thank you so much for this exciting life you have created for us, making it worth it. Thank you for helping us in the journey patiently, as we need patience. You need patience with us. Thank you for last weekend for giving us the opportunity to introduce the Urantia Book to some new folks and share it with some people already were acquainted with the Urantia Book and bringing us some souls hungry for your light. Thank you for helping us grow in your light so that we can share it better and grow in the brotherhood of man under your Father. In the name of Jesus Christ, amen.
Amen. Thank you for joining us at home. Please come see us again. Legs to stop working.
So many books at the expo.
That's true.
I think we